Well, grace and peace, beloved siblings, on this second Sunday in Pride Month, Sunday, June the 13th. This is one of my favorite months, but I bet you probably could have guessed that. 3 years ago today, I went out into the world presenting as my authentic self for the very first time. And I can remember seeing a great big pride flag plastered against the side of a building as I was driving into the city, and I can remember how the colors of that rainbow, 3 or 4 stories high, said to me, it's okay that you are here. It's okay that you are you. That's a whole other story. But anyway, I hope that you're thinking about your own stories, however they've been written this Pride Month. I want to talk about 1 year ago today. 1 year ago today, I was a nervous wreck because I was getting ready to come out fully to the world. I'd been building towards that moment for a couple of years. At that point, I'd been working on coming out in the only way that really made sense to me, in a sermon. I've been preaching sermons ever since I was 11 years old. I'd been doing it for so long in front of so many people in so many places and on so many occasions that I'd almost lost the capacity to feel anxious about it. Maybe I'd get a few butterflies now and then or some reservations if the topic was a hard one, but a year ago, for that sermon, I was nervous. I shared a word about the gospel passage that we've heard from this morning. It's the gospel according to Matthew, chapter 13, and it's part of a collection of parables that Jesus told, kind of one after another, or at least that's how it's written. Jesus, the Gospels tell us, was a classic storyteller. He had a story for everything. And some of the stories are really short, like the one about the mustard seed. Some were really long, like the one about the child who took his inheritance early and then ran away and left his father and his brother behind. Jesus never once said, okay, y'all, I'm going to give a talk this afternoon about 4 models of strategic engagement. If you'll look at slide number 1. Instead, he said, once there was a farmer who went out planting seeds, and some fell on the path, and some fell on the rocky ground, and some fell in the thorns, and some fell in good, fertile soil. And those are the ones that grew. By talking that way, by telling so many stories, Jesus was inviting us, the hearers, along on our own journeys of interpretation. And I said that in my sermon a year ago, that they're like sacred setups, and they come to us with the expectation that we're going to make our own connections and to think about our own punchlines. Well, there in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus told a couple of stories about precious things. A treasure buried in a field, so valuable that somebody sold everything they had just to buy that field. And a pearl, so valuable in the eyes of one collector, it was worth letting go of everything else just to get your hands on it. Now, I had done a lot of reading in an effort to make sense of this journey that I was on, and one of the titles that has meant a lot to me is called Beyond a Binary God, a Theology for Trans Allies by Tara Sowers. In that book, Sowers, a pastor and the parent of a trans child, wrote that for many trans Christians, the chance to live authentically is that pearl of great price. Like the person in Jesus' parable in Matthew 13, they have proven themselves willing to give up everything to possess this one thing. The chance to be ourselves, to live our truth. Now, I spent a long time doubting that truth or denying that truth or assuming that the season when I might have discovered that treasure had passed me by. I put myself through more inner turmoil than I could ever measure for far too long. Until finally, after accepting and understanding the truth about myself, I was ready to share it with the world. And so I did. And at last, wrote the poet Audre Lorde, you'll know with surpassing certainty that the only one thing that's more frightening than speaking your truth is not speaking. A year ago today, as frightened as I was, I knew that not speaking my truth, not seeking my treasure, not taking hold of my pearl, that was the really frightening thing. And so I gave the sermon, and I came out as a trans woman to a world who had thought for a very long time that I was a guy. I was ready for that to be the last sermon that I ever preached. I was ready to say, you know what, if this costs me everything, okay, fine. Because I knew what was at stake, personally and socially. I knew that I couldn't keep pretending and that I couldn't pass up a chance to really shake things up in a corner of the world where there's still a lot of entrenched bigotry and hatred masquerading as religious ideology. I knew that stuff. And I knew that if there was never another pulpit for me to stand in after that day, I was ready. Well, that last part, it didn't happen. Yeah, it was the last sermon that I ever preached for that particular church, but as it turns out, there were other churches that wanted to hear from me, to hear my perspective, to hear my story. And y'all, it wasn't just churches. I talked to journalists and they wrote stories. I was on television. I was on the radio. I did podcasts. I did forums. I did university lectures. I talked to the CBC. I talked to the BBC. I talked to the New York Times. There was a great big color photo of me in a black dress. I thought I looked pretty good in the New York Times. And I can remember telling one of my friends just before I came out that it was not going to be a big deal. And I said, word for word, this might get written up in our denominational news and Baptist news, but it's not like it's going to be in the New York Times or anything. Well, it was. And I couldn't believe any of it. I was mystified that people wanted to learn more about my story. I just kind of wanted to disappear for a while and focus on getting my bearings and focus on easing into my new life. I still kind of want to do that a lot because I never really got the chance. But then I believed that I needed to be visible because I believed that there were other faith communities that needed to have some hard conversations that they'd been putting off for way too long. And because I knew that there were other people out there like me, other folks stuck in their own closets whose doors were being held shut by bad religion and a whole lot of shame. Now, the tide of messages, folks, isn't exactly overwhelming, but I still do hear from people every week. I got a message the other day from somebody. For years, she wrote me, I was mad at God for making me dysphoric. And at first, this stopped me from transitioning, and then it stopped me from having a relationship with God. But now I realize that God made me trans. And I can see God's creativity and compassion to see you, a trans woman, bring glory to God in so many ways has had a meaningful impact on how I see myself and my relationship with God. Watching your coming out sermon, receiving communion from you virtually, and hearing your story has been healthy and helpful for me. So I'm writing to say, thank you, June. When I read stuff like that, I can look back at this last year. I can look back on the times when being visible has felt like the wrong choice, when I have felt more like a story than a person, than a human being. But when I hear from folks like that, it seems worth it. And then I start to feel something like pride. When we talk about pride, we're not talking about the kind of haughty arrogance that our faith generally cautions us against. Words have rich meanings, and I think some folks get that one mixed up. When we talk about pride, we are talking about what it takes for folks like us to say no. When the world says you should be ashamed of yourself for who you are, for who you love, for how you love, to say no. When they say that we shouldn't exist, or that if we must exist, we should take up as little space as possible, to say no. When they say we are broken or disordered or perverse or disgusting or sinful, to say no, no. Pride is what it takes to say no to shame. It's the spirit inside us that's fierce enough to say, who I am is a precious treasure, when shame wants us to think of ourselves as worthless. Listening to my story, the way I came out, the way I've embraced visibility, you might think that I'm someone who understands a lot about pride, someone who really fully knows how to say no to shame. So here's a confession for you. I'm not. Not yet. Shame is an insidious thing. It has this staying power in our lives because it has utility, you know? Shame was for many years one of the biggest and most impactful presences in my life. And because it's still the case in far too many places that the most shameful thing a boy can be is to be like a girl. Now, of course, I wasn't a boy, but everybody thought I was, and even I thought I was. Under those conditions, it was shame that helped me adapt. It was shame that helped me survive. It was shame that helped me blend in so I didn't get crushed. Shame kept me safe. And it'll do that if you want it to. But I was safe the way a treasure is safe when it's buried in a field. You know, I was safe the way a pearl is safe when it's locked up in a box. And treasure, folks, is meant to shine. Pearls are meant to show off all their shimmer. And what is adaptive in one stage of life can become maladaptive in another stage. That's what I'm learning. The shame that for years set the tone for my life isn't helping me the way that I once thought it was, the way that I thought I wanted it to. Now, I wish that I could tell you that my sense of shame just dramatically and miraculously vanished a year ago when I delivered my coming out sermon. I wish I could say that I felt like I was a living embodiment of this year's Pride theme here at MCC Toronto, that I could say that I really and truly felt unashamed and fiercely proud. I wish. I really do. What I can say for now is this. I'm still a treasure seeker. Still a treasure seeker. Last year, when I talked about seeking precious treasure, I was talking about my identity. But this year, the treasure that I'm seeking is pride. Fierce pride. The pride that I put on sometimes, like a favorite dress for special occasions to deliver a sermon or to talk to a reporter or something. But I don't wear it all the time. I want to. A church where I used to serve had a vision statement that began with these 4 words. We seek to become. We seek to become. Now, I talked often about our vision statement, and one of the insights that I was really fond of sharing about our vision statement is that it was aspirational. It wasn't a description of things as they were. It was a description of things as we dreamed that they could be. We weren't talking about something that we had possessed, something that we had gotten hold of. We were talking about something that we were always seeking. When you think about it, when you really think about it, there's so much grace there in that language, isn't there? To know that we can always be seeking. I don't know about you, friends, but I'm not sure that I could be part of a faith community that had gotten hold of everything it needed to get hold of. I absolutely would not fit in among a congregation of folks who had everything nailed down and figured out. I don't think I would want to be in a place without an abundance of grace for all kinds of folks at all kinds of stages of all kinds of journeys. I believe that God offers us all the grace that we need and then some. And just like a treasure that's too big to keep to ourselves, God invites us to share grace with others. I believe that God is guiding us, you and me, every single one of us, to keep working to become that community of grace and to dream dreams together, to live our truths together, to seek treasure together. So on this second Sunday of Pride, friends, what are you seeking? Amen.